So welcome on this, all of you. Welcome to this panel and welcome to our panelists. So I'm very happy to be part of this panel for a simple reason, is that we spend our lives as support structures hearing that on one side, investors don't find enough startups, and on the other side, startups don't find enough funding. And it kind of looks like a dating system where boys always say there are no girls out there, and same on the other side. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to have this conversation and try to see across these different personas that we have around this great setting. And so let us try to talk a bit about Africa. So in Africa, Earlystage clearly is less, I think we're talking more about shortage than in other regions of the world, taking the example of the US, for instance. Even though we clearly see a takeoff, in reality, up to 1 million, we still see a lot of shortage. And so the questions that I will start with, and here I'm asking the question to you, Mohammed. So Mohammed, you represent Launch Africa. So you're precisely the VC that is investing in Earlystage. And so what do you answer to this question? Today, do you really see a shortage in the number of startups in which you can invest? Or is the shortage on the side of the assets out there?
Yeah, so we actually don't see any shortage in pipeline at all. This may be because of the fact that we are Pan-African investors, so we do cover the entire continent and have invested in more than 20 countries so far. So we are looking at a very large kind of market of startups, so we don't see any shortage of pipeline at all. But what we do see is shortage of, or maybe not a shortage, or a little bit of more of a hesitancy to invest these days with the macroeconomic conditions. So if anything, that actually kind of stimulates our pipeline a little bit more, as there are less investors deploying capital out there. So we have more of them that are reaching out to us in Launch Africa. Our pipeline is still strong and plenty for us. And the competition is quite fierce. I think for us, from receiving a pitch deck or receiving a pitch from a founder, all the way until getting into investment committee is something that is probably less than 0.5% of the pipeline. So we don't see any shortage of pipeline for us, at least in Launch Africa.
So you would say that today in Africa there is place for many other VC players, or do you think that it's more a matter of having the VC players grow bigger?
Yeah, there's absolutely much more space for VC players, and we hope and we welcome more VC fund managers out there. To put things in perspective, we can look at Singapore, for example, which is a country of maybe 5 million population, and they have received more funding than the entire African continent did in 2021. Right. The same thing goes for Israel, also around 5 million population, and they have received more than the entire funding the continent received in 2021. Which for us in Africa was like a breakthrough year. We've raised a little over $5 billion, and it's something to be celebrated, but it's still very, very early in the ecosystem. There are still startups that we really, really wish to back, but just don't have enough capital to back. So I do welcome new VC money out there so that they can come and co-invest with us.
Thank you. So I'll continue with you, Kohei, representing Double Feather. And I think it's interesting to see your perspective and have your perspective from how Japan and your organization sees the investments here in Africa. What is the potential that you see? Particularly, we've seen you in many events right now. So what's your take on this?
Sure. I'd like to highlight that we invest into 6 countries so far in the African continent. It's not as much as Launch Africa and some other players, but we see very interesting phenomena here. I would like to talk from what we've seen in African continents, and then also some of the perspective from the global investors. What we see in an African continent so far, especially 2022 first half year, there is very clear divisions in a certain country, in a certain regions. Clearly, I would like to mention that Nigeria and South Africa versus some other regions, namely Kenya, Ghana, Egypt, and in those countries, we see clear trends in those two type of the groups. For instance, Nigeria and South Africa, we see compared to the 2021, for the first half of the 2022, we see that the number of the size of the ticket size went down, and then also that so far the number of the total amount has been invested in those two countries has been either flat compared to the last year or relatively lower than the last year. On the other hand, for instance, Ghana has already surpassed the entire 2021 capital raising amounts for the only by the first half of the 2022. And in Kenya, we see that the flat of the average ticket size in this continent, and then also we see the potential increase of capital invested in this country compared to 2021. And also in the Egyptian market, it's also the same. And they already surpassed that amount has been invested compared to 2021 already. So it's quite interesting to see that Nigeria and South Africa seems quite struggling a little bit to capture global investor and then also increasing the ticket size compared to 2021. Probably 2021 was super good. So kind of we see some sort of the adjustments here. And on the other hand, when we see the global investors, it seems that in a developed country, we see that up and down a little bit due to that extension of the corona situations and also Russian Ukrainian situations and increase in the inflations. For these reasons, multiple investors trying to kind of back off a little bit in a wait and see mode. They're looking into the diversification to hedge some certain type of the risk or diversifying the risk. And more investors trying to see diversification in the emerging markets, Southeast Asia, India, and then also including Africa. And because of some of those countries are kind of detached from the economical trends of developed countries. So this is a very nice way to hedge that or diversifying the risk. So we see very strong interest and an increasing interest in a certain type of the momentum coming in from the global investors in the African continents.
Okay, thank you. We'll take it a bit to you, Tarek, and your experience in support structures. So Tarek, you represent GSMA with a clear focus on digital platforms, but you have an experience in supporting startups. And my question to you is, do you think today, given the number of support structures we see in Africa, it's booming, are those support structures really doing their job in training, mentoring, and making sure that they create that bridge between the VCs and the startups?
Thank you for that question, Huda. So obviously, in the last 5 years, we've seen a growing number of support structures, incubators, co-working spaces, accelerators that are coming in and providing this new way of working, of creating businesses and changing the culture as well. As if you look at traditional businesses in North Africa and Africa were always either SME-based or microfinance. And there's also, these structures are providing this education to the market and also helping founders understand that there are opportunities in creating a startup. So your question is around, are they playing their role? Obviously, we're seeing more of them. A lot of them are taking lessons from Silicon Valley and all these other markets and coming into Tunisia in African markets and doing copy-paste. That obviously doesn't work so well because it's not the content, the networks, and the vision is not adapted to the local market. So obviously the best players are actually adapting their content and their resources to founders for the market. Secondly, I think the big challenge, I think, for all these SSOs and support structure organizations is that they don't interconnect. So they're supposed to not only provide capital, that's one, but also help the founder in launching a new product that is more fit for the user, connect with potential business development, help them connect and provide structure and resources for fundraising and help them become investment ready so that they can then go on and secure funding from VCs and early stage VCs. So I think these are also the challenges in where I think startups support organizations could do a better job in connecting with all the different players. So, and the players can be the business angels themselves, can be the corporates, existing funding opportunities, and also opportunities for them to build their network. Another thing is on methodology, I think that is missing. A lot of startup support organizations take a lot of time into just doing the ABCs, and so we'll have a marketing session here and we'll have a pitch session here, and they sometimes confuse incubator with school. So, and it's not necessarily the same thing. And an incubator is not supposed to be a school, but rather provide you the opportunity to have access to networks and to develop your business and to find new opportunities. I liked what Zach said about VCs not being like captains but more coaches. I think incubators have that same kind of role because some startups, early stage founders sometimes are first-time founders, and so they might lack sometimes that the principles of management, for example, some documents that they can use to structure their business, and so these are always useful, like mental models, templates like memos or data rooms are helpful in helping them becoming investment ready.
At the end of the day, right now, with the different cohorts that you've seen, what could you, and this is particularly, I'd say, a recommendation for startups that are sitting here, what are the similarities of the champions that you've seen, those that were really able to fundraise, whether they were from business angels or VCs or...
So we're talking about the startup support organizations still? Or
we're talking about the startups that are supported by the support organizations.
I think it depends. So in some markets, we're actually seeing specialized startup support organizations. So for a hardware perspective or fintech perspective, that could provide a lot of in-depth kind of resources. I think what helps them a lot is networks. When you're looking at the impact of what a Plug and Play has done to Morocco and providing all these corporates and changing the mindset within the corporate world to invest in startups and connecting them with other VCs in other markets and bringing VCs from Africa helps a lot. Flat Six Labs obviously has done a tremendous job in Tunisia and in Egypt. And also the fact that they're hybrid models because they're not providing support, but they're also providing that early capital to help them make that jump to get a proper seed round or Series A round. And that obviously, I think, helped a lot founders. I think other champions, they're involved in the ecosystem. They are active, they connect with all different actors, from the corporates to other VCs, bringing them closer. They get closer to government and trying to promote startup-friendly laws. They provide visibility to the market because before, I think I'm talking about North Africa in particular, before there was not a lot of visibility on these markets, but these structures helped create a critical mass where investors started taking interest into those markets. So I would see those. Okay,
I'll get back to you on the other question related to startups, but thank you for your answer. And Ismail, I mean, Shari, right now you're a startup that everyone's following. Great fundraising strategy so far. My first question to you would be, for startups that are looking at everything that you're doing in Morocco, how would you describe your journey in terms of fundraising? And can you tell us more about when you started to fundraise, why, and how did you do that?
We were lucky enough to raise money during 2021, and as many of you know, that was probably one of the best timing ever to raise money. In our case, we made the most of everything you just said, in a sense that we were in Morocco and Plug and Play just came, and obviously started bringing some visibility on our geographies. And for the first time, the country became investable. Sorry, I made up this word, but for the first time, global VCs started looking into our geographies when before they were focusing on English-speaking countries. And when you end up analyzing the country, you find out that there are so many great entrepreneurs, but unfortunately, many of them don't necessarily speak good English. So when you are a founder who can express yourself, who has gone through some American universities or American companies, it becomes obviously easier to discuss with foreign VCs. So we ended up becoming the first investment ever of plug and play in Morocco, which brought some spotlight on us, and we didn't stop there. We did leverage that investment to get further. So we contacted YC and we applied, saying, hey guys, you don't have any company coming from our region. The ecosystem is starting. We want to make sure that more and more interest will be put on our geography. Why don't we find a way to do it? So they obviously have startup school, but then they have the YC program. So we applied and ended up being accepted. And it's obviously one of the best accelerator in the world. And once you get in, you start receiving incoming leads from great VCs. So we ended up welcoming in our cap table people like Global Founders Capital, Rocket Internet. We even got Harvard University investing in Sherry, which again is for the region a good sign, because we are still early. We are an early stage company, but we hope to start feeding this pipe with company like us, who one day will get to later stages and probably do the first exit, which will create an ecosystem and hopefully bring more and more investors and recycle the money of the exit in investments in other companies.
Lucky you, great role model. I mean, and I think probably what we can say is just you have to dare. I mean, congratulations. Going back to you, Mohammed, I mean, what are the biggest mistakes? What are those common mistakes that you see on and on with the decks that you receive? And this is an opportunity for you to tell all of us, like, please don't do what?
Yeah, so I can talk about that, and I'm assuming that's from the startup's perspective, right? Yeah, so I can talk about that in two ways, right? So startups before funding and then startups after funding. So startups before funding, if you're fundraising and you're just going to email the VC a pitch deck and then kind of expect that the VC would be all over your pitch deck and then reach out to you, that's likely not going to be the case. In any given day, we are receiving tens and some days hundreds of pitch decks per day. So you have to do a little bit of extra work to kind of stand out, right? If there are portfolio synergies within the VC's portfolio, if there are strategic inputs, if there are ways that you can help another portfolio company expand into the country that where you're at. But just sending a pitch deck kind of, whether through an intro or whether unprovoked, is not really going to get you far, because the competition out there really is very fierce, and the pipeline is very full. And in terms of startups, what I have to say in terms of mistakes after funding is not leveraging on your VCs or advisors. Too many times we find startups all around that they're backed by great resources, they have great advisors on their boards, they have great VCs on their cap table, but they're not really leveraging the kind of networks that they have for one simple reason, right? It's that the founders, they want to tell us what we want to hear, right? They want to tell us that everything is good. They want to tell us that, everything is great. You've made a great investment. You should be proud of us. But that's not necessarily what I want to hear, right? I'm hoping that we can be a VC who is compassionate enough and who is empathetic enough for the founders to be able to kind of tell us when they need help, right? And this is what I want to do. I don't want to have a startup that goes on and tells me all of these great things, and then one day tell us, okay, we're gonna have to be frank, and we have about a month of runway left, and now we have to hustle and kind of find if we can follow on funding or if we can find other investors to come on in the round. When I could have realized earlier on that the burn is not really matching what was predicted earlier in the fundraising. Much earlier, it would be a lot easier for me to help out, kind of see for ways where we can save more money, or we can have services from our portfolio companies where they can provide service to service as opposed to payments for some of the things that they need. in which a portfolio that we have specifically constructed so that they can help the other startups in the portfolio become sustainable in terms of payment gateways, in terms of legal services, in terms of really anything that you can think of, EKYC. There are so many services that the startups can provide to each other that can help with their burn, with their runway. But I can only do so if you communicate with me that you need help, right? It's okay to struggle. It's okay. I don't expect you to be a superstar all the time. I expect you to be able to be vulnerable with me and to expect from me that I will have the empathy to understand and to help out.
Okay, but I'm getting back to the first part of your answer. You said that an email with a deck is not enough. You need to do more work. So are you saying like the email needs to be more precise, or there needs to be some ways for startups to get to see you in events? I mean, concretely, I'm a startup today, and I've identified Launch Africa, and I know that the email is going to go in the spam or is going to be deleted. How can I proceed?
Yeah, so all of the emails get looked at, but if you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of emails, it's kind of hard to stand out. I think just the way that some emails are written, if you're saying, so for us at Launch Africa, one thing that is clear for us is that we specifically diversify geographically to de-risk from geopolitical risk, right? So if some countries have devaluation in currency, and so we want to diversify geographically to get away from that risk. So if you're a startup in a frontier market, and you're in a market that we have not been before, you can reach out to me and say, hey, you haven't been in our market before. This is how we can fit in your portfolio. These are some of the services that we can do, and this is the amount of funding that we can raise. And it really takes a lot of creativity, right? I don't even know what I would be looking for right now in an email, but I'm hoping that I can be surprised by it. And we've definitely seen quite a bit of examples of that throughout time. I think in conferences definitely makes it a lot easier. In Africa Arena, we've definitely made investments from companies that we have made in Africa Arena. I think going to an accelerator as well makes our job a lot easier. So the mention of Plug and Play has been here a few times. So Plug and Play has done an amazing job in Morocco, where they have brought us in and kind of taught us a lot about the ecosystem and even helped us make our very first investment in Morocco. So going to an accelerator definitely helps.
Excellent, thank you. So I'd have the same question for you, Kohei. Would it be the same way, or do you think like each VC has its own practices?
Sure, probably I can just extend what Muhammad was saying. I would say that each GP or investment funds, their main clients, from their perspective, by true nature of the funds, is that LP investors. So by understanding who are the LP investors, some of the LP investors are not specifically clear in the public, but probably you can tell from their day-to-day activities on LinkedIn what kind of events they throw or what kind of meetings they hold, and through those information probably you can guess okay, probably this company's this GP is very strong. For instance, backed up by this type of the corporates. Or this type of the family office, they're looking for more impact or driven, or they're looking for more like strategic investment in the future. So maybe you can say that I saw your recent activities in these sessions or this program, and then I think that we can also add value to this the type of your partners or business alliance or LP investors. Then we might be able to bring some type of the values or informations or potential strategic partnership, so that those type of the partnership can open up the initial discussions with the investor to explore the idea. Investor also gain a lot of knowledge and information, and we can also explore some new type of the angle to how we can actually add value to our LP investors. So by coming in from the different angle, rather than pitching yourself, please invest into my company, you can add on top of it that how you can be valuable, and then how you can add extra value to our counterparties.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, it's a very interesting perspective, because it's true that usually for startups, the focus is always about how am I going to help you make money? How can I demonstrate that my startup is a successful one? Well, in reality, it's a much bigger perspective, and this is also what you said, Ismail, by saying that you tried to pitch the fact that YC was not present in the region. So question to you, we hear a lot of startups constantly, and it's a bit of an ego thing about, I've raised 3 million, I've raised 30 million, I've raised 100 million. So the question is, do you really think that today it's a matter of raising as much as possible because it's better to have money? Or do you really think that it's extremely important to, as a startup, know exactly the right amount that you have and just aim for that amount?
There are two things here. There is one, should I raise the exact amount or more or even less? And two, from whom should I get the money? I'll start with the second point, which is going to lead to the first one. In a normal life, a dollar is fungible. Whether I get it from you or from you, I use it the same way, it worth a dollar. But in the VC world, this rule is not true at all. There are some VCs from whom a dollar worth much more than from other VCs. Reason being that there is a better fit. You get friends, you get advice, you get introductions, and you end up creating a relationship that takes you further. When sometime you get money from some people, you never heard back again from them. Even worse, some of them are asking for daily and useful reports and waste some of your time. So I'm talking to all of the startups here, make sure not to get the money because of the sake of the money, but because you feel there will be a great human relationship with the person who's going to back you for the rest of your entrepreneurial journey. So you said earlier you used Tinder, or you, unfortunately myself, I got married before Tinder came to life. So I only know that you can swipe left or right, but make sure to swipe the right way. So no, to get back to the question about the amount, again, getting too much money is the worst thing that could ever happen to a company. Mainly because you will feel that you are out of danger and that you have enough money forever, which is a big danger. Reality is you have to find as soon as possible a product market fit that will make sure that even without money, you'll be able to prove that you have a real proof of concept that will bring money from anyone because he will believe in you. So make sure to do your maths, make sure to do your provisions, be predictive, find out what's the exact money you need either to reach break-even or to get to a certain point that will make you be interesting to next stage VCs. Give yourself a buffer of probably 3 to 6 months. We say no, that because of the macroeconomic situation, it's better to have a longer buffer. But raise only what you need. And raise only when you have a clear objective of how you're gonna use this money.
Thank you, great answer. And very enlightening, and I hope that it will enlighten many of the startups that are into the fundraising right now. Question for you, Mohamed, but also Kuhe. I mean, we often see, and I'm really here looking from the perspective of startups that are really at an early stage. We see investors as investors. We don't really understand their DNA, but also which are the ones that are for early stage, the ones that are for later stages. What are the differences, the main differences between investors that are looking at startups early stage and the ones that are looking at the later stage?
I would say that those investors who are looking at the early stage and then maybe later stage, I would say the comparisons is relatively clear. By looking at their transactions and then by nature of what kind of value they can add on top of that to the startups, that's completely different. I think that an early stage company, since that probably like for instance, what we are looking at is a C to Series A rounds. That's the sweet spot that we are investing. The reason is that we are people coming from the investment banking background, advisory background, and also PR and marketing background. And then often that early stage companies are lacked of those type of that, certain type of the expertise. Therefore, we can add value, and we can guide them, and we can also be supplements of that early stage startup who needs certain type of that hands-on support, and we can be the bridge in order to prepare for that global Series A rounds or later rounds. But a series or a later stage investors, what they're looking for is a little bit different. Often they're looking for potential acquisitions. So, for instance, some of the VC are backed up by a few major corporates or institutional investors, who wants to maximize that pure investment return or potential acquisition opportunities. So the way they add value to the startup by bringing those people on the cap table is completely different. And I think you need to be able to identify what kind of value you want them to play on your cap table by selecting the right investors and right time.
Yeah, so I can add a little bit more to that. So, in the early stage, it's more of an art, and in the later stage, it's more of a science where you can apply some metrics and maybe some multiples and a few things to be a little bit more quantitative about it. In the early stage is a little bit more qualitative. So in the early stage, we're looking for obviously a team that we can believe that this team has the right experience and has the right plan to be able to tackle the market that they're going for. But other things we're looking at are unfair advantages, right? So I'm looking at if you are, for example, a fintech and you have some special licenses already or have great traction in terms of licenses, that's something that's going to give you an unfair advantage. We're looking for corporate partnerships, right? So to be able to do POCs, to be able to sell to businesses. If I can see that, and I see, especially for the B2B startups out there, if I can see that you can sell to businesses, to corporates, to telcos, and you know what they want, and you're able to reach them, that is a huge advantage as opposed to a startup that has yet to figure that out in the early stage. And you can see those in terms of pilots, POCs, and so on and so forth. So we are looking for those unfair advantages. We're looking for startups who've made some traction, even though a little bit, in really tough markets that are hard to get into. So things that can kind of build a moat around the startup.
Okay, so we'll try to look at it from a different perspective. And here I'd have this question more for you, Ismail and Tarek. We often look at it from the VC's eyes. What do they need? How should startups behave? How can they improve? But at the same time, and because VCs in Africa essentially are also generally new players, what are the main improvements that you would recommend to VCs for this relationship to be healthy and fruitful?
So what can we recommend to VCs on better supporting, I think, the startups and helping them raise more funds and attract more capital? I think, like you just said, $1 from a VC will change depending on who you're going out with. If we're taking the analogy of Tinder, and it's important to choose well. So obviously, I think it's very important. Any startup that can go and work with one VC and take money from one VC, but have the next step ready. For example, a VC that is willing to put a first early stage ticket, but then recommend them to their LPs or providing them other funders is super important. And then you have kind of at least some sort of understanding that they can help you in the future rounds, which a lot of VCs don't do. It's one ticket, and then it's on your own, and hopefully you'll make an exit. I think communication is super important, especially in the early stages. And so providing structure, support, meetings, helping them access other markets is crucial. And so that is very important. And so VCs that have a right blend in their LPs from institutionals to corporates to maybe business angels, advisors, and have support around them, for example, on the marketing stage, on the product side, can really be very beneficial. And I invite startups to seek those type of investors out. Startups can always contact other startups that have raised investment and do their due diligence. I think you do due diligence. It's only normal for startups to do the same and can look at the information. And finally, I think you touched on portfolio. And I think if you see a VC working with their startups and helping them create programs and creating synergies, joint venture JVs, opportunities, you know that you're working with a VC that is startup friendly and startup first, versus somebody that is very capitalistic and just looking for a return.
I fully agree what you just said. I think number one is helping the startups raising if they need. And we know that it's a game, and this game has some rules, and many of the founders don't know the rules. And it's a job of a VC to train and teach their portfolio companies on how to understand the game. That's number one. Number two is obviously giving them the right contacts within corporates, within other funds, but also within other startups of the portfolio, doing similar activities or synergic activities. And this is why a network of YC is doing so well. It's because they help you get in touch with the right people to help you bring further your business. And this is the role of a VC again. And then when it comes to international expansion, obviously when you are from Morocco or from Tunisia, and given the size of your market, you need to go to other geographies, and it's not necessarily an easy task. Mainly because you don't know the local challenges, because you don't know how it works. And that's the role of a VC who has this helicopter view, because he has seen so many companies in so many different countries to help you out with that. So, yeah, I would say that a great VC is someone who masters not only your vertical or your space, but also your geography, right? And you have to find the right mix between industry and geography and find the right partner for your entrepreneurial journey.
I'd like to add on top of the previous two speaker mentions. I like to bring the two examples here. I think the communications and then also establishing the relationship earlier is always better. I'd like to, one example here is that I'm not going to mention the specific company, but it's one of our portfolio company based in East Africa, mobility company. We invested in 2019 during the Series B rounds. And immediately after, we took them to the roadshow to Japan, and we introduced the corporate investors, and then sovereign wealth investors, and then also a few angel investors. At that time, they say all of them say no, and they are showing them initial interest, but no one made investments during the Series B rounds. And afterwards, they started declining during the middle of the COVID because no one traveling around this mobility company, and they start feeling a little bit of shaky. And then, they start seeking for the help to the LP investors, the GP investors. And then at that time, we didn't have enough capital to further back them up. But we thought about, what we can do. So we arranged that hybrids online sessions for him and then for other portfolio companies to introduce and then also make discussions with other investors. We brought around 10 and plus a few angel investors, probably like 18 or 20 investors. So that although we could not make a further investment, we could not support, but we trying to help that by making the introductions, even though they're not part of our LP investors or any so on, but we made the introductions. And then all of them said no at that time. And then beginning of this year, they start shaking it really, really hard. And we're not sure they can survive or not. And what happened was that there's one investor out of the relationship they built along the way since 2019, they got rejected by twice, and they're the one who actually saved them in the very last minute. They say that, okay, we'll make the investments, and then we will lead these rounds, and then other committed existing GP and investor also followed. And then, it's not disclosed yet. We might see it in pretty soon, but that's what happened. So I think that creating those type of relationship along the way, even though you get rejected, it's super, super essential to keep it. But probably I can just hold it here. Yeah.
Thank you. Also, there's often this frustration or, say, gap that we see in the ecosystem and supply chain. How many minutes? 0? Okay, so I'll conclude with this. I hope that in the future, and the way the VC is going to evolve in Africa, there's going to be also more and more interactions with the support structures, because those are the structures that are serving the VCs. And for now, the linkage and the dialogue is not always in place. So happy to see more and more VCs in Africa, happy to know that there is no shortage. And I hope that it has been a useful session for the entrepreneurs out there and for all the other actors. Thank you so much for our panelists, and have a great end of the day.
Thank you.